Canon Episode 4. Why don't people understand Scripture, even when they read it? Introduction. Because after everything we've looked at, after examining how the texts were preserved, how they were transmitted, how they were recognized, and how boundaries were formed over time, there's still something that has not been resolved, and it's not a small question. It's not a secondary issue. It's something that sits at the center of everything we've been discussing. Because if the canon exists, if the writings have been preserved, if we have access to the words, if we can read them, study them, compare them, then there's something we should expect to see. We should expect clarity. We should expect consistency. We should expect that those who read, those who study, those who spend time in the text would come to the same understanding. But that's not what we see. Not in practice, not in history, and not even in Scripture itself. Instead, what we see is something very different. We see people reading the same passages and coming away with different conclusions. We see interpretations that don't align. We see disagreement, division, and in many cases, confusion. And this is not limited to people who are careless. It's not limited to people who are casual. It's not even limited to people who are unfamiliar with the text. This happens among people who are serious, people who are committed, people who genuinely want to understand. So now the question has to shift. Not just, what is the canon? Not just, how was it formed? Not just who decided what was included and what was left out, but something deeper, something more fundamental. Why? Doesn't the text produce the same understanding in everyone who reads it? Because if the words were enough, this wouldn't be happening, and if the structure alone were sufficient, there would be consistency. But there isn't, which means we are dealing with something beyond the text itself, something that affects how the text is received, how it is processed, how it is understood. And until that is addressed, the conversation about the canon remains incomplete. Because this was never only about what was written, it was always about whether what was written is actually understood. Chapter 1. The problem. At a certain point, we have to deal with something most people never stop to examine, not because it's hidden, but because it challenges what we assume to be true. Because most people believe that if something is written, it can be understood. That if they read carefully, if they take their time, if they go back over it again and again, that eventually they will arrive at clarity. That the process is simple. Read, study, understand. But that's not what actually happens. Because if it were that simple, there wouldn't be so many different conclusions coming from the same text. There wouldn't be so many interpretations, so many positions, so many disagreements, all rooted in the same words. And this isn't just happening at the surface level. This happens in things that matter. Foundational things, core ideas. So now the question becomes unavoidable. If the words are clear, why isn't the understanding consistent? If the text is available, why isn't the meaning unified? If people are reading, why are they not seeing the same thing? Because people are reading, they're studying, they're comparing, they're dedicating time, effort, attention, and still, the results are different. That gap cannot be explained away. Because that gap reveals something. It reveals that there is a difference between having access to the words and actually understanding them. And that difference is where the real issue is, not in what is written, but in what is received. Because two people can look at the same passage and not be seeing the same thing at all. One reads and moves on. The other reads, and something shifts. Something connects. Something becomes clear. Same words, different result. And that's the part that has to be explained, because until that is addressed, everything else stays incomplete. You can talk about the canon. You can talk about preservation. You can talk about what was included and what was left out. But if understanding itself is not consistent, then something deeper is at work. And that's where this begins. Chapter 2. The disciples' problem. Because if the issue were simply effort, then those who were closest to the truth would have understood it clearly. But they didn't. And that forces us to confront something deeper. Because these weren't distant observers. These weren't people reading secondhand accounts, trying to piece things together. They were there. They walked with him. They heard him speak directly. They watched the works unfold in real time. They saw things that no one else had seen. They were present for the teaching, the correction, the explanations. And still, they didn't understand. Not fully. Not consistently. There were moments where something made sense, and then moments where it didn't. Moments where they followed, and moments where they questioned. Moments where they saw clearly, and moments where they completely missed it. And this wasn't because they lacked access. It wasn't because they weren't paying attention. It wasn't because they didn't care. They were committed. They stayed. They followed. They listened. And still, they struggled to understand what was right in front of them, which means the issue was not distance. It was not access. It was not even exposure, because they had all of that. And yet, understanding was still not consistent. That changes the equation, because now it's no longer enough to say, if I read more, if I study more, if I get closer, because they were already close, closer than anyone. And still, there were things they did not see. So now the question deepens. If being present wasn't enough, if hearing directly wasn't enough, if walking alongside the truth wasn't enough, then what was missing? Because something was. And until that is identified, the same pattern continues. People reading, but not seeing. Hearing, but not understanding. Following, but still uncertain. Which means the problem is not outside of them. It's something within the process of understanding itself. And that's what has to be uncovered. Chapter 3. The Ethiopian Moment. And if someone were to say, maybe they just needed more time, maybe they just hadn't studied enough yet, then there's another moment that removes that explanation completely. Because now we're not looking at someone who was confused in the presence of teaching. We're looking at someone who was actively seeking, someone who was reading, someone who was intentional, someone who had already made the decision to go into the text for himself. He's not distracted. He's not careless. He's not indifferent. He's focused, reading, trying to understand what's in front of him. And when he's approached, he's asked a simple question. Do you understand what you're reading? And his answer reveals everything. How can I? Except some man should guide me. Think about that. He has the text. He has the willingness. He has the focus. And still, he does not have understanding, which means something is missing. Not effort, not sincerity, not access. Something else, because he's doing everything most people assume is enough. He's reading. He's engaged. He's seeking to understand. And yet, he recognizes that he cannot arrive at understanding on his own. That statement is not weakness, it's awareness. Awareness that there is a gap between reading the words and actually understanding what they mean. And instead of ignoring that gap, he acknowledges it. How can I? Except I'm guided. That question is still being asked today, even if people don't say it out loud, because the experience is the same. Reading without clarity, seeing the words, but not seeing the meaning, trying to understand, but not fully arriving. And just like before, this forces the same conclusion. The issue is not the presence of the text. It's not the willingness to read. It's not even the desire to understand. There is something required that goes beyond all of that, because reading alone does not produce understanding. Chapter 4. The limit of translation. And even after seeing all of that, there's still another layer that has to be considered, because up to this point, the focus has been on the reader, their effort, their proximity, their sincerity. But now the focus shifts to the text itself, because what is written is not always what is received. And that's something that was understood much earlier than most people realize. There were those who recognized that when something is expressed in one language and then carried into another, something changes. Not necessarily the structure, not necessarily the words themselves, but the weight, the depth, the full sense of what was being communicated. And this wasn't hidden. It was acknowledged that what was originally expressed did not carry the same force. Once it moved into another tongue, that something can be preserved and still not be fully conveyed. Think about that, because now we're dealing with something different. Not just whether someone is reading correctly, but whether what they're reading is being received in its original weight. Because language does more than transfer words. It carries meaning. It carries context. It carries nuance that doesn't always survive translation. So now the situation becomes even clearer. A person can be sincere. They can be focused. They can be reading carefully. And still, what they're receiving is not the full depth of what was originally expressed. Not because something is wrong, but because something has been carried across a boundary. And in that movement, something subtle can be lost, which means the issue becomes even more defined. It's not just the reader. It's not just the effort. It's not even just the access. There are layers between what was first expressed and what is now being read. And those layers matter because they affect how something is understood. They affect how something is perceived. They affect how something is received. So now the question deepens again. If the reader can be sincere, if the effort can be real, if the text itself has been carried across languages, then what actually produces understanding? Because at this point, We've removed every simple explanation, and what remains is something deeper, something that cannot be reduced to reading alone. Chapter 5. The limit of text. So now we've arrived at a point where every surface level explanation has been removed. It's not effort. It's not proximity. It's not sincerity. And it's not even just the movement of language. So now we're left with something deeper. We're left with the text itself and the assumption that the words are enough. That if everything is written, if everything is preserved, if everything is available, then understanding should follow. But that assumption doesn't match reality, because if the words alone were enough, we would not see what we see. We would not see disagreement coming from the same passages. We would not see division built on the same foundation. We would not see multiple conclusions drawn from the same text. And yet, that's exactly what exists across time, across cultures, across groups, who are all reading the same words. So now the question becomes unavoidable. If the words are present, why is the understanding not unified? If the text is consistent, why are the conclusions different? If everything has been preserved, why is clarity not universal? Because at this point, we can no longer say it's just a lack of effort. We can no longer say they just need more time. We can no longer say they just need better access. All of that has already been removed, which means the issue is not outside the text and not outside the reader. It's something deeper that connects both, because the same words can produce different outcomes. One person reads and moves on. Another reads and something changes. One sees information. Another sees meaning. Same text, different result. And that difference is not random. It points to something that is required for the words to move beyond information and become understanding. Because without that, the text remains what it is. Words preserved, available, but not fully seen. Chapter 6. The real issue. So now, after removing everything else, we're left with something that can't be avoided, because every explanation that sits on the surface has already been stripped away. It's not effort. It's not proximity. It's not sincerity. It's not access. And it's not even the movement of language. So what remains has to be the real issue. And the real issue is not the text. It's understanding, not whether the words are present, but whether what those words are pointing to is actually being seen, because there is a difference between recognizing words and perceiving meaning, a difference between reading a sentence and seeing what that sentence is revealing, and that difference is where everything changes. Because a person can read accurately and still not understand correctly. They can repeat what is written and still miss what is being communicated. They can even explain the structure and still not perceive the meaning, which means the problem is not mechanical. It's not about literacy. It's not about access to information. It's something deeper, something that affects how meaning is received, not just how words are processed. Because at this point, we're no longer dealing with text on a page. We're dealing with perception. what you're able to see when you look at what is written, because two people can read the same passage and one sees information while the other sees revelation. Same words, different result, and that difference is not explained by effort. It's not explained by study, and it's not explained by access, which means something else is determining what is understood, something that has not yet been named, and until that is identified, everything stays unresolved, because you can preserve the text perfectly, you can translate it carefully, you can study it consistently, and still not see what it's saying. So the issue is not whether the text is there. The issue is whether it is being seen. And that is where the shift begins. Chapter 7. What opens understanding? Because at this point, we're no longer asking whether there's a problem. That's already been made clear. We're asking something else now. What actually changes it? What takes a person from reading and not seeing to reading and suddenly understanding? What closes that gap? Because something does, and it's not gradual. It's not just time passing. It's not just more exposure to the same words. There is a moment where something shifts, and Scripture doesn't describe that moment as something being built. It describes it as something being opened. That word matters because it changes how you see the entire process. To open something means it was already there, but not accessible, not available in the way it needed to be, which means before that moment, understanding was not absent. It was closed to the one who was reading, closed to the one who was hearing, closed to the one who was present, even though everything else was in place. The words were there, the teaching was there, the exposure was there, but access was not. And then something happens. Not a new teaching, not a new explanation, not additional information, but access. Something opens, and when it does, everything changes. The same words now carry meaning, the same passages now connect. The same things that were heard before now make sense, not because they changed, but because the access did. That's the difference. And that difference cannot be explained by effort. It cannot be explained by repetition. It cannot be explained by study alone, because all of that was already present before anything opened. So now the process becomes clear. Understanding is not something you construct. It is something you are given access to. And until that access is opened, the words remain what they are, visible, but not seen, readable, but not understood, which means everything we've been looking at has been pointing to this moment, because now the real question finally comes into focus. What is doing the opening? Chapter 8. What is doing the opening? Because now, the question has been narrowed down completely. Not whether understanding exists, not whether it can be reached, but what actually causes it to open, what changes the state from closed to accessible. Because that change is real. It's not theoretical, it's not abstract, it's something that happens, and Scripture does not leave it undefined. It points directly to it, not as an idea, but as a presence, because what opens understanding is not effort, it's not study, it's not repetition, It is the Spirit, Ruach Ha Kodesh. And this is where everything begins to align, because the same ones who heard the words and did not understand were the same ones whose understanding was opened. Not when they studied more, not when they repeated what they heard, but when something was present that had not yet been present before, the Spirit. And when that was present, the words did not change, the teachings did not change, the text did not change, but their understanding did, immediately, which means the cause was not external to them. It was not in the text itself. It was not in additional information. It was in what had now been received. The Spirit did not add to the words. It revealed what the words were already saying. And that's the difference. Because without that, the words remain what they are. Information. Structured. Preserved. But not fully seen. And with that, the same words become something else. They become clear. They connect. They reveal, not because they changed, but because the one reading them now has what is required to see them. So now the pattern is complete. Understanding is not achieved. It is opened, and what opens it is the Spirit. Chapter 9. The Spirit is not abstract. And this is where something else has to be faced. Because once it becomes clear that it is the Spirit that opens understanding, then the question is no longer if it matters. The question becomes, what is it actually doing? How does it operate? How does it show up in the process of understanding? Because if it determines what is seen, then it must have a way of expressing itself. And it does, but not in the way most people expect, because many think of the Spirit as something distant, something undefined, something you can talk about, but not recognize. But that's not how it functions. The Spirit is not abstract. It is active, and it is observable in how something is understood. You don't see it with your eyes. You see it in the result. You see it in the shift. You see it in the moment where something that was unclear becomes clear, where something that didn't connect suddenly aligns, where something you've read before now carries weight in a way it didn't before. That is not random. That is not just growth. That is not just time. That is the Spirit expressing itself. And that expression is not one-dimensional. It shows up in different ways. Sometimes as clarity, where something becomes sharp, defined, undeniable. Sometimes as conviction, where something presses inward and won't let go. Sometimes as patience, where understanding unfolds instead of forcing itself. Sometimes as peace, where something settles and you recognize it as true. And sometimes as correction, where what you thought you understood is replaced, not gradually, but clearly. And all of these are not separate sources. They are expressions of one Spirit, which means something very specific. What is present within the one reading determines what is revealed. Because two people can read the same passage, and one walks away with information, while the other walks away changed. Same words, different outcome, and that difference is not explained by effort. It's not explained by study. It's explained by what is active. in that moment, because the Spirit does not just reveal the text, it shapes the perception of the one reading it. It brings forward meaning that was already there, but not yet seen, and without that, nothing changes. The words remain, the structure remains, the access remains, but the meaning stays hidden. So now it becomes clear. It's not just that understanding is opened, it's that what opens it has expression, and that expression determines what you are able to see. Chapter 10. Wisdom from the beginning. And this is where the scope has to expand, because what we've been looking at is not something that started later. It's not something that appeared after the text was written. It's not something that was introduced as an addition. This has always been the pattern from the beginning, because the same thing that opens understanding now was present then. Not hidden, not absent, present, before structure, before systems, before what we now recognize as written scripture. There was something else. Wisdom, not as an idea, not as a concept, but as something active, something present, something that operated, because creation itself was not random. It was ordered. It was structured. It was intentional. And that order, that structure, that intentionality came through something. Wisdom, which means understanding, has never been separate from the Spirit. It has always been connected, because what brings order is the same thing. That brings clarity. What establishes structure is the same thing. That reveals meaning. And that has been true from the beginning. So now this is no longer something that can be limited to a moment in time, or a specific group, or a later development. This is foundational, because before anything was written, there was already a way that things were understood, and that way was not through text. It was through the Spirit, which means the text was never meant to replace that. It was meant to align with it, to reflect it, to point back to it, and without that connection, the words remain disconnected from the meaning they were meant to carry. So now the pattern is no longer partial, it's complete. The same thing that opens understanding now is the same thing that was present then, and that means understanding has always depended on it, not just now, always. Chapter 11. Solomon. Received, not learned. And then there is a moment where this becomes unmistakably clear, not as a concept, not as a pattern you have to piece together, but as something direct, something asked for and given, because there was a man who was placed in a position where he had to choose not what to read, not what to study, but what to receive. And the options before him were not small. Wealth, power, longevity, influence, everything that most people would consider the highest outcome. And instead of choosing any of that, he asked for something else: understanding, wisdom, the ability to perceive correctly, to discern, to judge rightly, not based on appearance, but based on what is actually true. And that request was granted, not earned, not developed over time, given, And once it was given, the difference was undeniable, because what followed was not just knowledge, it was clarity, insight, discernment that could not be explained by study alone. Situations that required more than information were resolved through understanding, which proved something very specific. What he received was not data. It was perception, the ability to see what was actually there, and that ability was valued above everything else, above wealth, above power, above influence, because once it is present, everything else is affected, everything else is shaped by it, which means this is not secondary. This is central, because if understanding were something that could be built, there would have been no need to ask for it, and if it were something that came automatically, there would have been no need for it to be given. But it was both asked for and received, which means it does not originate with the one seeking it. It comes from somewhere else, and when it is given, everything changes, not because the world becomes different, but because the one perceiving it does. And that brings us back to the same point again. Understanding is not something you construct. It is something you receive. Chapter 12. Messiah. Full expression. And then, what had been present from the beginning, what had been asked for, what had been given in part, was no longer partial. It was fully expressed, not as an idea, not as a principle, but in a person. Because everything we've been tracing, the opening of understanding, the presence of wisdom, the ability to see what is true, was not just something he spoke about. It was something that was in him completely, without limitation. And that's why, when he spoke, it carried weight. Not just because of the words, but because of what was behind them. Because understanding was not something he was trying to reach. It was something he operated from. And that changes everything. Because when something is fully present, it doesn't just remain contained. It affects everything around it. And that's exactly what happened. Because those who were around him were exposed, not just to teaching, but to the source of understanding itself. And yet, even then, they still did not fully understand, not because something was missing in him, but because something had not yet been opened in them. And that distinction matters, because it shows something very specific. Understanding is not transferred simply by being near it. It is not absorbed just by hearing it. It is not activated just by exposure. Even in the presence of full expression, something still had to happen. Something had to be opened. And when that moment came, everything they had already heard, everything they had already seen, everything they had already experienced, finally became clear. Not because it changed, but because they did. Because what was in him was now active in them. And that is the connection. That is the link. What was fully present in him is what opened understanding in them, which means the pattern is complete. Wisdom from the beginning, given to those who ask, fully expressed in him and required. For understanding to be opened, not optional, essential. Chapter 13. The upper room, received, not taught. The men. The moment comes. Not another explanation, not another teaching, not more words, but something else. Because everything they had already heard, everything they had already seen, everything they had already experienced was still not fully understood, not yet, not completely. They had the exposure, they had the memory, they had the words, but they did not yet have what would bring it all together. And then something happens, not gradually, not through study, not through discussion, but in a moment, in one place, with one outcome. Something is received, and when it is, everything changes. Not because they were given new information, not because they were taught something different, but because what they had already been given now became clear. Think about that. They didn't receive new words. They received what allowed them to understand the words. And that difference is everything. Because from that moment forward, you no longer see uncertainty. You no longer see confusion. You no longer see hesitation. What you see is clarity, boldness, alignment, because what was missing was no longer missing. What had not yet been present was now present. And once it was, everything they had already encountered took on its full meaning, which means the turning point was not a lesson. It was a reception, not something they figured out, something they received. And once it was received, the same words, the same teachings, the same experiences became something completely different. Not because they changed, but because what was needed to understand them was now active. And that's the moment everything shifts, because now the pattern is no longer theoretical. It's demonstrated. Understanding follows reception, not before, after. Chapter 14. Peter, before and after. And if there was ever a question about whether something actually changed, you can see it clearly in one person, before and after, because before that moment, even after everything he had seen, everything he had heard, everything he had experienced, there was still hesitation, still uncertainty, still moments where he did not fully see. He could respond quickly, he could speak with confidence, but that confidence was not always rooted in understanding. There were times where he had to be corrected, times where he misunderstood what was being said, times where what he thought was clear was not actually clear at all. And when pressure came, that uncertainty showed itself, not because he didn't care, not because he wasn't committed, but because something was still missing. Understanding had not yet been fully opened. And then, after that moment, everything is different. Same person, same history, same experiences, but now clarity, now alignment, now boldness that doesn't collapse under pressure, now speech that is rooted, not just in memory, but in understanding. What was once uncertain is now clear. What was once reactive is now established. And that shift cannot be explained by time. It cannot be explained by repetition. It cannot be explained by effort, because all of that existed before. The only thing that changed was what had been received. And once that was present, everything else aligned, which means the difference between before and after was not the person. It was the understanding. And that understanding came from what was now active within him. Not something he built, something he received. So now the pattern is visible, not just in theory, but in transformation. Same man, same words, different understanding. Chapter 15. Prophecy, not isolated, but beginning. And that moment was never meant to stand alone. Not as an isolated event, not as something that happened once and then ended, because what took place there had already been spoken of before it ever happened, long before that room, long before that moment. There was already a declaration that this would not remain contained, that what had been limited would be released, not held back, not reserved, poured out, and not on a few, on all flesh, which means what happened there was not the fulfillment in its entirety. It was the beginning of fulfillment, a focus moment where something that had been spoken entered into reality, but only in part, because when something is poured out, it doesn't remain in one place. It spreads, it moves, it reaches beyond the point where it began. And that movement is what defines what we're looking at, because now we're no longer dealing with something that belongs to one time, or one group, or one moment in history. We're dealing with something that is expanding, something that is filling, something that is moving outward beyond its initial expression. And when it does, it produces the same result. Understanding is opened, not constructed, not assembled, opened. And that opening does not stay internal. It expresses itself in what is spoken, in what is seen, in what is understood. That's why what follows is not silence. It's expression, prophecy, vision, dreams, not as separate phenomena, but as evidence that something is now active. The same spirit, now moving beyond one place. And when you look at it this way, what happened in that room was not the full picture. It was a preview, a concentrated glimpse of what it looks like. When understanding is opened on a broader scale, which means the pattern doesn't stop there. It continues, it expands, it moves outward until what was once limited becomes widespread. And that brings everything into the present, because now the question is no longer, what happened then? It becomes, what is happening now? And whether what was released is something you have received. Chapter 16. Experience when understanding opens. And this is where everything stops being distant. Because what we've been looking at is not just something that happened to them. It's something you've experienced, whether you recognized it or not. Because there have been moments where you've read something before and nothing stood out, nothing connected, nothing shifted. It was just words. And then, at another time, you came back to that same passage, same words, same structure, same text. But something was different, something connected, something became clear, something that wasn't there before was now there. And it didn't feel like you learned something new. It felt like you saw something that had always been there. That moment matters because most people explain it away. They call it growth. They call it experience. They call it understanding, developing over time. But that's not what it is, because nothing in the text changed. The words didn't change. The structure didn't change. What changed was your ability to see it. Understanding opened, not gradually, not piece by piece, but in a moment. And when it did, everything that was already there became clear. That's the same pattern, the same shift, the same difference between before and after, just like Peter. Before, uncertain; after, clear; before, reacting; after, established. Same man, same words, different understanding. And just like that room, before, they had the teaching; after, they had the understanding. Not because something new was added, but because something was received. And when it was, everything they had already heard finally made sense. That's what you've experienced. Not learning, not accumulation, access. A moment where something opens, and what was once unclear becomes undeniable. And once that happens, you don't go back to seeing it the same way. Because once something is seen, it cannot be unseen. That's the difference. That's what changes everything. Understanding, being opened. Chapter 17. Seeking the required response. And this is where everything shifts again. Because once you recognize that understanding is opened and not constructed, then the question is no longer just, what is true? It becomes, what are you doing about it? Because this is not something that happens automatically. It is not something that happens just because you are present. And it is not something that happens just because you are listening. There is a response that is required. And this is not mentioned once. It's not isolated. It appears again and again and again across different writings, across different times, across different voices. The same instruction, repeated. Seek him, not casually, not occasionally, diligently, with intention, with focus. Because this is not something that comes to those who observe. It is not something that comes to those who remain passive. It is given to those who seek. That's the pattern. Not suggested. Established. And that means something very direct. No one can do this for you. Not a teacher. Not a video. Not a system. Because seeking is not something that can be transferred. It has to be done personally, individually, because the same spirit that opens understanding responds to those who pursue it, not those who wait, not those who assume, those who go after it. And this is where everything becomes clear. Because up to this point, it could be observed, it could be analyzed, it could be followed. But now, it has to be lived. Because if you don't seek, you remain where you are, reading, but not seeing, hearing, but not understanding. And that is not because the text is lacking. It's because the response has not been made. So now the pattern is complete. Understanding is opened. by the Spirit, and it is given to those who seek. Chapter 18. Dimension beyond the surface. And this is where something else begins to open up, because once you understand, that meaning is not always sitting on the surface. You begin to notice something. There are moments in the text that are recorded clearly, but not explained fully. They are presented, but not unfolded. You can read them. You can see what happened, but you're not told everything. And that is not an accident. That is intentional, because those moments are not meant to be dismissed. They are meant to be recognized as places where something more is present than what is immediately visible. Take one of the clearest examples, Abraham. After war, after conflict, he is met by someone who appears suddenly, not introduced with background, not explained in detail, but present. A king, a priest, Melchizedek. And in that moment, something happens that is not fully explained. There is recognition, there is alignment, there is response. Abraham gives a tithe, and then the moment ends, recorded, but not unfolded. So the question remains, why? Why this encounter? Why this response? Why this level of recognition without explanation? Because what is being shown is a moment that has dimension, but the dimension is not fully described. It is left there, and that is where seeking begins. Because when you encounter something like that, you are not meant to ignore it. You are meant to pursue it, to ask, to search, to look deeper. And when that pursuit happens, there are other writings that point to something more, not to replace what is written, but to add dimension to what is already there, to give context to what was not fully explained, to reveal that what appeared sudden was not random, that what seemed isolated was connected, because there are accounts that identify this encounter differently, that point to lineage, and in those accounts, the identity becomes clear that this was not a random figure, not an unexplained interruption, but someone already within the lineage. The same as Shem, still present, still carrying what had been passed down, still connected to what Abraham was stepping into. And when that is seen, the moment changes, not the text, the understanding of it, because now what looked like a brief encounter becomes something else, a recognition, a meeting between what had been preserved and what was being established. That connects this moment to something that existed long before it. And when that is seen, the moment changes, not the text, the understanding, because now what looked like a brief encounter becomes something else, something intentional, something connected, something that carries weight beyond what is immediately visible. And this is where the balance becomes critical, because the goal is not to replace the text. The goal is to see it more clearly, to recognize that what is written can carry more than what is immediately explained, that there are layers that are not accessed through reading alone. They are accessed through seeking and through understanding, being opened, because without that, These moments remain flat, disconnected, unexplored, but with it, they begin to reveal something deeper, something that was always there, but not yet seen, which means the text itself is not lacking. It is layered, and those layers are revealed, not by adding something new, but by seeing what was already present. Chapter 19. Personal witness, when conviction forces the search. And this is where everything becomes personal, because at a certain point, this stops being something you analyze, and it becomes something you cannot ignore, something that doesn't just sit in your mind, but presses on you. And that's what happened to me, because there were things I came across, specifically in the book of 2nd Esdras, that didn't just raise questions. They carried weight, the kind of weight that doesn't let you move on, the kind that stays with you, even when you close the text. And it wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just, this is interesting. It was something deeper, something that pressed inward, something that demanded to be understood. And in that moment, there are only two options. You either repeat what you've read, or you go and search it out. And I couldn't repeat it. Not without understanding it. Not without knowing where it came from. Not without knowing how it connected to everything else. Because if it carried that kind of weight, then it deserved that kind of attention. So the only option was to go back, to search, to trace its origin, to understand its place. And that process is what led me into studying the Canon at all. Not as a debate, not as an argument, but as a response. Because what I had encountered would not allow me to stay on the surface. And that's something important to understand, because that pressure does not come from the text alone. It comes from what is behind it. The same spirit that opens understanding is the same spirit that presses you to seek it. That doesn't let you stay comfortable with partial understanding. That doesn't allow you to repeat something that you haven't actually seen. And once that process begins, everything changes, because now you're not reading casually. You're reading with purpose. You're not just going through the words. You're searching for understanding. You're tracing connections. You're asking questions. You're going deeper, because something is pulling you there. Not curiosity, conviction. And that's the difference, because curiosity can stop. Conviction doesn't. Curiosity can be satisfied. Conviction has to be resolved. And that's what led here. Not an idea, not a system, a response to something that had already begun to open. Chapter 20. Final collapse. Nothing else explains it. So now, there's nothing left to lean on. Every explanation that could have been used has already been removed. Not gradually, completely. It's not effort, because people are reading. It's not sincerity, because people genuinely want to understand. It's not proximity, because those who were closest still didn't see. It's not access, because the text is available. It's not translation, because even where the words are clear, understanding still differs. And it's not the text itself, because the text remains consistent, while the understanding does not. So now there is only one place left to look, not at what is written, but at what is happening when it is read, because everything we've walked through points to the same pattern. The disciples heard everything and still didn't understand. The Ethiopian read sincerely and still needed guidance. The text remained unchanged, but the results did not. And then something happened. Not new information, not a better explanation, not more time. Something was received, and when it was, everything they had already heard finally made sense. That is the pattern, not once, consistently, which means the difference is not in the words, it is in what is present. When the words are received, because without that, nothing moves past information. The text remains readable, but not understandable. It remains visible, but not seen. And with it, the same words become something else. They connect, they reveal, they make sense, not because they changed, but because access did. So now the conclusion is no longer optional. It's unavoidable. Without the Spirit, the words remain closed, not absent, not hidden, closed, and until that changes, nothing else will, because the issue was never the text, it was always whether it was understood. Then opened he their understanding, so that they might comprehend the scripture. Chapter 21. Final revelation. So now, the answer is clear. The issue was never the text. It was never what was written. It was never what was preserved. The issue is whether it has been opened to you, because the same words can remain closed or become clear, and that difference comes down to one thing: whether the Spirit is present. Chapter 22. Final question. So now, this is no longer about the text. It's not about what is written. It's not about what has been preserved. It's about you, because everything we've walked through leads to this. Not what you've read, not what you've heard, but what you've actually seen. So the question is simple. Are you reading or are you seeking? Because one keeps you where you are, and the other opens understanding. Chapter 23. Next steps, reference and pathway. And for those who are serious about going further, this is where your process continues, not by stopping here, but by taking what you've heard and beginning to search it out, because everything we've walked through is traceable. It can be followed. It can be examined. And that's why the reference library is there, not as a replacement for the text, but as a guide to help you see the connections, to help you track what has been presented, to help you search it out for yourself. Because at the end of the day, this is not about what you've been told. It's about what you're willing to seek. And for those who want to go deeper into understanding how the Spirit operates and how these expressions connect, There is also a short study available on the Seven Spirits, not as something to replace your reading, but as something to walk through. As you continue to seek, you can find it here. https://amazon23 Kos